greetings everybody, and welcome. We're calling right here from Black Hat in Las Vegas today, and we have this wonderful backdrop right behind us, and we're so excited. I'm being joined by Alissa Knight, Ali. I get to call you Ali now.
You can't. We're friends.
Right. Thank you for joining us, and really
Can
excited.
I call you Davey?
You can call me whatever you want. Absolutely.
No, it's okay.
Now that we're friends, yeah. But we're here at Black Hat, so we're so excited because for the first time we can kind of be together a little bit, and exciting to see it. I was just down on the Black Hat floor and seeing all the excitement of the conference and things, but I'm excited to have you, and I want to hear all about your story in just a minute and what's going on. But I'm the founder of NightDragon, Dave DeWalt, just have the record down, and I've been in the cybersecurity industry for about 20 years or so, as have you, maybe even longer. And we're here to really talk about offense and defense. And Alissa is just an incredible resource, former hacker at 17. She really, well, at 13 probably even, you got involved in the cyber industry and has an amazing record, wrote 2 books, sold 2 cybersecurity companies, another book coming out, and one of the best, I believe, resources in the entire cybersecurity industry. So in just a second, I want to set the stage, if I can, for a moment, because it's important, I think, what's happened over the last 18 months. We were at RSA maybe 18 months ago or so, and the world's changed a lot. And not just the pandemic crisis and the cultural crisis that we've had, the climate crisis, the economic crisis, government crisis, all kind of created an incredible threat landscape that we're now living in, probably the single highest threat environment we've ever seen. And here we are living today in a world where just about everything is vulnerable.
Right.
And just to rattle off a couple stats for a minute, we've seen not just the rise of espionage over the last few years and disinformation campaigns during the election cycles. Now we're watching ransomware come up in a way that we've never seen before.
Right.
Thousands of victims happening there. Incredible rise, 57 times growth in ransomware over the last 2 years alone. $20 billion problem that's happening. We're discovering 0 days just about every minute, it feels like. And CISOs can't keep up. It's very difficult to manage a security operation in this day and age with the attack surface the way it is. The good news on the defensive side is the rise of all the vendors. We now have 3,500 plus security vendors, I think, all here at Black Hat. We have an incredible amount of inertia of investments that are happening. Just to give you a stat, 10.7 billion in private equity in 2021. Incredible numbers just happening there. We watched the rise of companies in the public markets in the last year. We've seen our first 2 $50 billion market cap companies in CrowdStrike and Palantir. Congratulations to them. We'll probably see our first $100 billion market cap company as well. So a lot of threat, a lot of customer spending, a lot of investment, probably the most interesting times we've seen in the cybersecurity industry in my 20 years. So enough of that. I want to talk about you because you have such an amazing story, and I want to hear a little bit about it. Did you really get into cyber and hacking in your teenage years? And tell me a little bit about what that was about.
Yeah, I don't know what most 13-year-old kids did because I wasn't doing that. But yeah, I got into hacking when I was 13. This was around a time of what it was internet relay chat. So it's basically these massive networks of chat channels, and that's where I met my first hackers. And I really got exposed to the hacking community. And it was around this time that you really didn't have the resources that you have today. You didn't have YouTube. Google didn't exist back then. A lot of these things and resources like securitytube.net didn't exist. There was no Black Hat briefings. None of this was around. And the only real way that you could learn was to download exploits and learn and use them and learned how they worked that way. So yes, I started when I was 13. I unfortunately made a lot of bad decisions as a child, as most children do. And when I was 17, I hacked into a government network. And around that time, I was doing a lot of these breaches from my school. So I went to school one day and the authorities were waiting for me and they rushed me right when I walked onto campus. And I was that kid who everyone kind of picked on and, you know, had my head flushed in the toilet. And, you know, but all of a sudden that day I was the coolest kid in campus, right? So, but yeah, that's my story. It's typical Hollywood story, you know.
What was your first computer? What did you hack
486 SX25.
480, okay.
486 SX25, 4 megs of RAM, not gigs, 4 megs of RAM, 40 meg hard drive. It was a beast at the time.
And a baud rate modem.
Yes,
what? Yeah.
very good. 2400 baud rate modem.
Oh, that was pretty fast.
Yeah, that was fast. That was fast. Yeah.
So you hack a government agency.
Yeah,
Imagine
it was.
Their surprise.
Yeah.
You get arrested. Actually arrested.
I did, and I was obviously really scared. You know, I mean, it's not something to really write home about. And you know, the thing is my dad, God rest his soul, he picked me up, and it's funny because he said, you know, I have to hand you, my father was a Southern man. Okay, so he, you know, I felt the end of his belt a lot because I was always getting in trouble, and I thought he was just gonna whip me right in front of everybody with his belt, and. He laughed. We were driving home in the car, and he kind of laughed. And he's like, you know, most fathers have to pick their children up from jail because they got arrested for, you know, breaking in to something or, you know, some other crime, drugs. You hacked a government network. That's kind of cool. And so that was the start of it. And you know, the thing is that I actually downloaded classified documents in this hack, and I won't go too much into it, but basically, when I realized what I had stumbled upon really scared me, and I knew that, all right, you know, it's only a matter of time, right?
But it probably also opened your eyes to the art of the possible, right? So,
it did.
Yeah, you might have done something that was illegal, and clearly you paid the price for that, but it also opened your eyes to the potential good of what you can do in your life. And that's what's so impressive to me is like, okay, you learned from this a little bit, and then you turned into an entrepreneur. And when I hear a little bit about that too, so I'm an entrepreneur too.
Yeah, of course, definitely. No, I'm nowhere near your level, but so the charges were eventually dropped, and I went to, at that point, decided, well, I could be a high school dropout and do nothing with my life, or I can get paid to do this. And the idea of an ethical hacker was just kind of being coined. Like it wasn't. This was all very new, early '90s. And so what ended up happening was I started my own company, and we got acquired by. I started it when I was 17, and I sold it to a public company when I was 20. And that was interesting. And I
was drinking beer at college when I was 20, not quite the same way.
I've lived a very, you know, boring life. I don't know what a rave is. I've never been to a rave. I've no idea what that even is. But I was doing that, and shortly thereafter, after I sold that, I went to work for some startups in Silicon Valley. So I grew up in Northern California, and I started my second startup when I was 24, and I sold it when I was 27 to a public company in New Zealand called Endace. They make high-performance network cards, and that was my second successful M&A. And I actually, when I was running that company, did a buy-side M&A where I acquired one of my competitors. So I've been both on the sell side and buy side of M&A work, and I love it. I'm probably the only hacker you'll ever meet that really gets that business acumen.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible combination coming from being a hacker to then building companies for defense. Tell me about the books that you wrote for a minute too.
Sure.
I want to hear about that because not only are you really technical, you really understand the cyber marketplaces. Not only have you built companies, sold companies, you wrote books as well. I want to hear about them.
Sure. So I lived in Stuttgart, Germany, hacking into connected cars for a major tier 1 OEM out there and an automaker. And I thought, look, you know, there's really no content out there on hacking cars. There's no real books, nothing really focused on remote car hacking. Most of it was in the CAN bus, where you're inside the car. And I figure I care less about that attacker that has to break the window and get in than the attacker who can do it from their living room. So I wanted to write a book on that, and that's where I've always focused. It's kind of like that George Clooney movie, Peacemaker, where he said, I care less about the terrorist that wants 100 nukes. I care more about the terrorist. I'm scared of the terrorist that just wants one, right? So I'm scared of the attacker that can do it remotely. So that's where I've always focused my vulnerability research. And so I wrote a book on it, published it under Wiley. That came out last year. And now I'm publishing a new book on hacking APIs. And I was also approached to write an autobiography. I'm also writing a screenplay for a new TV series based on my life.
Wow, pretty amazing story. I am so proud of you. I
Thank
can't
you,
even tell
Dave.
you. I really am. And is it true that you actually worked with law enforcement and hacked police cars as well? I got to ask you about that, just in case I need you one day.
Yeah, no, totally, exactly. This is probably the most exciting thing I've done in my 2-decade career. So when that book came out, I was approached by a captain of a police force, and he reached out to me and said, look, there's all this technology going into the cockpit of law enforcement vehicles, and we're basically IP addresses floating around on the road, and we're concerned about the life and safety of our police officers. And so I decided, I really want to do this philanthropic work. I care about our law enforcement. I want to make sure they're safe and supporting their mission. And so that's what I did. I went out there, I got the full support of the law enforcement community. I got to play with any law enforcement vehicle I wanted. And there's actually an entire fleet of there's these interceptors, these responders, all these different vehicles, prison transport vehicles. And they're all vulnerable to these attacks. So what I discovered was I could remotely control the vehicles. I could start and stop the engine. I could lock and unlock the doors. And all of this through what are called APIs, or application programming interfaces. And everything around us in this world, IoT devices, our financial infrastructure, our healthcare system, they all communicate with APIs. It's the plumbing of our world today. And that's where a lot of the vulnerabilities are. And so I could actually remotely control these law enforcement vehicles over these APIs. So having said that, that's really been 2 years of my work, and I recently, and actually at DEF CON this year, I'm unveiling that work for the first time publicly. Yeah. And so it's really exciting. I ended up getting approached by Department of Homeland Security, CIA, NSA, FBI, and I ended up presenting to all of the 3-letter agencies in a massive presentation. And I knew they wouldn't believe me, so I recorded video of me doing this. And unfortunately, these vulnerabilities don't just affect law enforcement vehicles. The automaker, I found these vulnerabilities affect every single one of their cars on the road. So unfortunately, a lot of these vulnerabilities haven't been fixed yet, and it's been 2 years. So we need to be doing better. And it's not just about innovation. Yes, innovate. We as humans, that's what makes us great, is we innovate and we continuously evolve. But we need to do that securely.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit more, because one of my whole themes as now an investor with NightDragon is to really look at the biggest gaps of what the offense can do, the attackers can do, and what the defense can provide. Right. And my whole theme for my career now has been, what can I do to help put capital, advisory, investments into something that closes the gap. It's almost like in the UK, mind the gap, right? So yeah. I'm all about the gap. We picked like 10 major themes that we were focused on that are really, what we believe is the biggest gaps that are out there. And I want to ask you a little bit about them, because you're going to write about one of those themes, which is the API area. And as we watch this incredibly expanding attack surface today, which is all this incredible inertia of technology and innovation, and the hardening of security is way behind that. Right. And then you start to couple that with all the attackers in the world. You then put geopolitical tensions on top of everything, and you have a perfect storm. And that perfect storm is manifesting itself in everyday life. Do you believe like APIs are one of the biggest gaps that you see right now? And obviously you're writing a book on it. But why is that so vulnerable? Like, what's behind that? Is it because everything is open and published? Like, what's the root cause of that?
So, this is a religious debate on whether or not it's appropriate to be using this term in cybersecurity, because so many people died on that day. But there's a lot of individuals in our industry that refer to a cyber 9/11. I don't know. I'm still on the fence as far as whether or not that's appropriate to be using. But let's say the jury comes back and we all decide, okay, it's okay to use that term. I would dare to say that APIs are going to be the cause of that Cyber 9/11. Everything in our OT technology, operational technology, IoT. I headed up SCADA security for San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station. So I'm a SCADA certified security architect, and I did pen testing against nuclear power equipment. If you talk about being able to take a country down, if you wanted to take a country down, you would start with their APIs. If someone asked me how I could take the United States down in less than a day, it would be through their APIs.
Amazing. And, I'll tell you one story, and you know this a lot more technically than I do, but when I was vice chairman of Forescout, we did a lot of network access control and IoT security. And one of the things that stuck in my mind so much was the number of APIs a particular Chinese camera maker had called NightVision. It was like 900 APIs, all published online, all with access to this equipment.
Right.
And, China made aside, it was still showing that all these published APIs created this incredible access point to an endpoint like an IoT device. And that's just one of many, many, right? So it's an interesting segment of the market.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's almost like we went back 20 years, because if you look at the vulnerabilities that I'm finding in these mobile apps that are communicating with APIs and these endpoints, is we're hard coding usernames and passwords in them. We're hard coding keys and tokens. That's stuff we did 2 decades ago. You remember that? We're repeating the sins of our fathers. We keep repeating history, and we're not learning from it in cybersecurity. And now, unfortunately, our critical infrastructure is powered by APIs. That's the plumbing of our critical infrastructure. So I don't know if you read this, but there was a book that was written by 2 generals out of the Chinese military, and it was called Unrestricted Warfare. And did you read this book?
I've read that one. No. Does this keep you up at night, this
good.
kind of book?
This is good. You're going to prepare yourself. You're going to get some chills. All right. So this book was published in 1999. All right. So they talked about how the U.S. military is no longer able to be defeated on the battlefield. We were the first country to ever completely take over and conquer another country in less than a week when we took down Iraq. Okay? So we did that in less than a week. So this book talks about how you can only defeat the United States through asymmetry, through asymmetric warfare. No one can conquer the military machine of the United States on the battlefield anymore in traditional warfare, which is why asymmetric warfare in basically what's called irregular warfare is so effective against the U.S. military, because we only understand kinetic weapons. We don't understand cyber weapons, right? And I think everything's going to change real fast.
Let me ask you about
We're not going to be the hegemony very much longer.
Let me ask you about that, because I have these 10 themes, but I'm curious what your themes are, where the biggest gaps are. APIs, I get. I mean, that is one of the biggest problems, and we have to clean up the hygiene of that. There's a lot of things we have to do as a world to make it a safer place there. But what other types of themes come out? One of the areas, for example, I see that I worry a lot about is this whole notion of our social networks, right?
Right.
The virality of information and social media. And one of the areas that concerns me is most chief security officers, we put all these security defense in depths on email, but what about all the other channels of communication we now have, the Slack channels and the WhatsApp channels and every other channel?
It's the soft GUI exterior, honestly. So I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to say it's theoretical because this actually happened, and I have an NDA with them. But so I was targeting this organization, and I was allowed to use any means I wanted. I could use any means I wanted. And also the ultimate crown jewels was me taking remote control of these robots, which were actually replaced humans in this warehouse. And so this company actually makes clothes, like the clothes you're wearing, out of recycled plastic. Okay, so and you could feel the shirts, and you never knew that it was recycled plastic.
Great idea, right?
Yeah, it's great. But all of this is made by robots. And so I was allowed to use any attack vector I wanted. So you know which one I used? I used LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
So I went on there. I found who the, because you can organize by job category, And I listed who the network admins were for that company, and I went on LinkedIn, and I was looking for one of their managers to write a recommendation for them so I could find out who their manager was. So I did that. I connected with both of them. I saw who their manager was, and I sent an email to that individual and messaged them on LinkedIn and got to know them, like social engineered them, even pointed them to a few resources that I thought would be helpful. It solved a problem for them, and we became friends. And this took a period of, I don't know, a week and a half. Then I sent an email to them, and it got caught by their spam filter. So I sent a weaponized PDF file through LinkedIn where there was no antivirus. There's nothing. If I could send you a file over LinkedIn and there's nothing that would check that, right, for any sort of backdoors. And he downloaded it and he executed it. And I had a backdoor into his machine, and his computer connected back to my computer at home, and I had remote control of his computer. And he was none the wiser. And he happened to be, and I knew because he was a network admin, that he was a domain admin in the Active Directory server. So I now had domain admin credentials on the network. Then I pivoted from his machine into the warehouse, and I actually found the computer that was controlling all the robots that were walking around the warehouse and moving things around. And each robot had cameras on its eyes. I could see, I had control over 52 robots. And I had complete control over them. I could tell them where to move. I could tell them what to pick up and move. I had complete control of this warehouse.
What was the total time from the start to that?
So the social engineering time to become friends and weaponize the PDF and get them downloaded was a week and a half. And then once they downloaded it and I had remote control of the robots, about 3.5 hours after they executed the weaponized PDF file.
It really shows you like the vulnerability of these new communication collaboration tools, right? You have the Zooms, you have the Teams, you have the Hangouts, you have, obviously the LinkedIn's, and most companies don't realize how many channels and how much traffic is actually happening there and how vulnerable to social spear phishing they are. Think about some others. I'm really curious, another area that we worry a lot about is just, this whole area of supply chain.
Right, supply chain security.
Supply chain security, and like most companies don't realize like the products that they're buying, where are they coming from, who touched them along the way,
right.
What kind of risks might they occur, and what kind of APIs might those supply chains have. So, part of one of our themes is we got to improve the risk analysis on supply chains. We got to understand where it's all come from. We got to secure that supply chain, and as a world, we got to get better at testing that supply chain for vulnerabilities and APIs. What other ones jump out at you? I'm curious.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we do put a lot out there regarding our relationships with suppliers. I don't know. Obviously, you have some history with Mandiant, so I was actually part of the response team with Mandiant on the big biotech breach with the APT investigation. And what they did was they got us by reading a press release we published about a supplier that we had partnered with in Arizona. And they actually, instead of coming in through our front door, they hacked the supplier and came in through the side channel where we had no defenses. And I think the systemic problem there, and I'm also a CISO in addition to other things, because I'm so bored, is we don't trust but verify. Like we have this problem where we'll go to a supplier and say, tell us what framework you're using. Oh, you're ISO 27001 certified? Okay, show us that you have a valid certificate, and we stop there. Why do we stop there? Why do we? Okay, just because you're ISO 27001 certified, compliance does not equal security. They're two completely different things. And so what's happening is I think adversaries know that this target has a huge security budget and they've got a lot of security controls why make it hard for myself? We as hackers we're inherently lazy people. Hackers are lazy. We're going to take the path of least resistance. If I can go through a supplier and hit you through a partner that you've got a VPN with, that you've got a site-to-site VPN with, why go directly through you? I'll just go through your partner.
One of the areas that I always try to educate is our own industry, the cybersecurity industry, because one of the biggest gaps that I see in the world is actually the vulnerability of the security companies who are technically
MSSPs.
supposed to be the sort of the protector of the companies. What kind of pen testing do you do? How much supply chain analysis? Where does your code come from? Where have you developed that code? And SolarWinds like examples of this, where suddenly one of the biggest targets of the hackers are actually the security companies who are controlling, and we've seen tons of those, haven't we?
Yeah, security companies they're not, just because they are our security company or they're our MSSP, it doesn't mean that they're impervious to being breached themselves. And the problem with that is that they hold all the keys. They're the key masters. They have access to everything, especially if they're doing MDR. What if they're doing MDR? That means they have domain admin. So, and hackers aren't stupid. They know that. And so they're going to go after MSSPs. They're going to go after the suppliers who supply to MSSPs. And who I'm thinking about starts with a K. We recently experienced that. And so, you're going to go wherever will yield the most results for your level of effort. So if I hit one MSSP and they have 1,000 customers, Dave, I've hit 1,000 victims. I haven't just hit one. Why go after each individual 1,000, each one of those companies in that portfolio when I can just go after one MSSP and get them all?
I will tell you, as a CEO of multiple cybersecurity companies, the amount of attacks that I had when I ran my companies was alarming. And the sophistication of those attackers was incredible.
They're not.
And what I try to tell the 3,500 cybersecurity companies are, if you want to sell to mission critical companies in the world, you better be the best security company internally as well as the product that you release. What's your supply chain? Have you done pen testing? I know you do a lot of this for a living. I try to tell them, you got to have the gold standard because you are the keys to the kingdom, and the attackers know that. So one of my big themes is educate the security industry on that problem as well.
Eat your own dog food. I mean, to me, and we need to have that same level of due diligence for our security services companies, the technologies we buy, not just the MSSPs, the service companies, but the technology companies. How often do you do static and dynamic code analysis of your product we're deploying? How often do you do pen testing? What are you doing to keep your code and your product safe that I'm buying and deploying in my network? It's a question we need to be asking.
100%. Other areas that, one man in this industry, I'm alarmed at this race to space problem that I see too now. All of our devices are connecting up now. That car is connecting up that you're hacking and showing the vulnerabilities to. The watch that I'm carrying is connecting up. Infrastructure is connecting to low Earth orbit, Earth observation satellites now, and infrastructure is now in the sky versus fiber optic. And how much have we hardened that? And by the way, those satellites fly around the world, and what nation's security is flying around too. So another example.
And there's a lot of hackers that focus on hacking birds, that focus on hacking satellites. A lot of the vulnerability research that I like to focus on is embedded systems, and embedded systems are in everything. I had a client approaching me about hacking connected trains, so we're hacking connected trains now, hacking floating boats, super yachts. So everything is getting an IP address now that historically was not connected. And the problem is that we think, oh, we can just throw an IP address on this thing and all is well in the world. But the problem is that you're taking something that has been for us over a century or for decades, has never been connected to anything, and now we're making it connected. What happens? All of those vulnerabilities we didn't have to worry about before are now a worry. They're now an attack surface. Our family's in the car. That's why I tend to focus more on hacking embedded systems and passenger vehicles, because I don't care anymore about the web server defacement. I don't care anymore about that sort of thing. Now it's all about affecting life and safety and monetizing that data. Things have changed over the last couple decades.
Let's turn it to a second, and then I want to ask you about the future. But yeah, we have a new administration here in the United States, and a lot of effort to put out executive orders and new policies to try to improve the cyber hygiene. And I applaud that, honestly, just having served 4 administrations in the White House and watching the maturation of this. Governments have to do a lot more now. This is requiring a full village to work together, private and public together. And I'm curious from your perspective too, like, how do we start to turn that asymmetric theater into, a more peaceful environment? What big picture things can we do? I always talk about, sort of the scenario in 2015 when the Obama administration had a cyber peace treaty momentarily with China.
Right.
I say momentarily, but at least from running one company with FireEye, we saw a lot of silence for a period of time, and new administration comes in and new politics occur. But aside from a peace treaty, what can we do in this world to even this playing field and do a better job? Is it law? Is it regulation? Does that solve anything? Is it cooperation? What would it be from your perspective? You're on the other side sometimes too.
Yeah,
Curious.
so it's interesting. So a lot of people don't know this about me, but after I sold my last company, I left cyber for a while, and I actually went to close quarter combat training, and I actually was the first woman to go through this private SEER training, and traded in my keyboard for an M4. Went through sniper training. I took on 2 contracts.
Sitting further away from
No, Dave, no. And supported the counterinsurgency advisory and assistance teams in Afghanistan and a counter ID contract in Iraq. And so I have a lot of geopolitical knowledge that I love to have the opportunity to talk about. And one of the things about geopolitics and the world stage and the hegemony system that we're in, you have different polar powers, right, that are all struggling to be the new hegemon, right? You've got China, you've got Russia, you've got these hostile nation states that are all kind of battling for power. And what's power? Knowledge, right? So one of the things we were discovering was that China was on this hunt for cancer treatments. Cancer was skyrocketing in China. Like, what was it? Some prime minister, there was a lot of these, a lot of people were dying from cancer in China. And we were trying to figure out what was going on, and we saw that they were actually trying to steal cancer treatment from biotechs in the United States. And so I think the answer to your question is there is none. I don't think there is a right answer, and I don't think it'll ever change. The thing about it is that with data comes knowledge, which then there's power, right? If you can't create it, steal it. Good ideas are made, better ideas are stolen. These countries can't create these treatments to cancer and other things that we have the knowledge and the brain trust, if you will. This is what my wife likes to say. The brain trust in the United States around this capability. So why recreate the wheel when we can just hack the United States and steal it for ourselves? And that's what's happening. We saw that with the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, right? The Chinese version of the plane looks remarkably similar to ours. It's because they stole it from us. Ellie, and you know all about that.
I do. And CEO of FireEye, I always talk about, and I remember this number very clearly during my time, we responded to 5,572 confirmed U.S. soil IP thefts by China.
That's insane. Yeah.
So, almost every area of technology and industry was targeted during this 5-year campaign, and we ended up just watching amazing intellectual property theft and recreation in the China market. So I get it, and I always talk about this, what I say is the 5th domain or the 5th battleground, and whenever mankind has discovered a new domain, I like to say, whether it was new lands or oceans or air or space or now cyberspace, what has the world done? Conflicted over those domains. But what's changed the difference? It was technology.
Right.
You know, when the battle of lands and armies or armadas in the oceans or air supremacy in the wars, and now you look at the cyber domain, and this quest for knowledge in cyber is sort of like this great cyber arms race is 100-year war, I say. And it's an amazing theater we're in.
It's an interesting topic of discussion because think about it though. Like air, sea, and land and space is heavily predicated on the ability to be able to have these homeland defense contractors building this, you know, high-tech weapon systems and all this technology. Cyberspace is the ultimate equalizer, right? I could take down an entire country's military in cyberspace just by myself because I have fundamentally more advanced exploits than they do. I have access to zero-day exploits that they don't, of systems that they're running, things that affect their weapon systems, of operating systems running on their embedded systems, which are powering their missile launchers. You know, it's the ultimate equalizer. And I don't have the money of that country. I don't have the military of that country. I'm one person. Yeah. But because they're connected, I now don't care about how big the United States is, or the fact that they have Lockheed Martin, or the fact that they have, you know, these other defense contractors, Triple Canopy, or what have you. I'm myself, but I'm much more nimble. I'm much more quick. I can write my own exploits. I can, you know, it's the ultimate eagle. That's what
I was waiting
really
for you to give me the chills. Now you just gave me the chills. Right, so I mean, your words are such incredible wisdom words because this is the reality we're living in today.
It is.
Is that a mouse can roar, so to speak, right? Yeah. You know, a hacker can roar, and we're in such an asymmetric theater that, you know, the smallest of army of one sometimes can bring down nations, and this is where we're at.
And Dave, when have you ever seen companies brought into a theater of operation? When have you ever seen soldier facing soldier of uniformed combatants for two countries coming in and then start pulling in corporations into that battlefield in the middle of those shots being fired? The only place that happens is in the cyber battle space. And so we have these organizations, these corporations who are keepers of this data that are being pulled into this cyber battleground, into the cyber battle space, and they're expected to go up against these countries' military units. All these countries are building up these massive capabilities to build these hacking units that are members of their military, and they're and these companies are up against them. And who do you think's going to win?
And to give you an idea, you know this really well, but we track it. You know, when I first came into the cyber community, only 2, 3, 4 nations actually had offensive commands.
Right.
Now we have almost 100 countries in the world with offensive commands.
Right.
So you now have both offense and defense played by half the nations on this planet and growing.
Yeah.
So just talking about the world, I almost feel like we need a cocktail now.
We definitely need a drink.
Maybe in the last part of this segment, let's talk about the future for you. I'm
really
curious, you know, you've accomplished a lot, incredible amounts. Like, what do you still want to do? And what do you want to accomplish? You got your new book coming out. There's going to be a documentary on you coming out. You have television shows and things.
Yeah.
What's left for Ali?
Oh, no.
Come on,
I think,
you know,
okay, so, you know, I really, actually, I'm a builder, right? I'm a creator. I love to create. And I really want to continue to explore taking other people's visions and other people's creations and bringing that further. I want to get very involved, more involved in venture capital, investing, M&A work. I'm really thrilled in doing M&A transactions. I'm continuing to explore video and cinematography. I think, Dave, the answer to your question is all of the above. I want to do everything, and this is such a short life. And I think this pandemic has proved that to all of us, that tomorrow's not promised to any of us. So I want to do it all. I want to, you know, I got really involved and really interested by virology in this, and now I want to be a virologist. I want to go back to school. I want to do all these things. I want to live a bunch of lifetimes in one lifetime, and that's what I want people to be able to say at my funeral is, you know, she lived the life of you know, 1,000 people in a single lifetime.
By the way, to give her some accolades, when I met you, you created a little trailer for me, which was a little bit of our fireside chat here at Black Hat, and you created the coolest damn NightDragon I've ever seen. You have to see it.
Thank you.
And by the way, I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for you and all the things you've done in your life. You're such an inspiration as a human,
thanks,
a person, and a leader in this industry. So, and you have the coolest damn name of company, Night Inc. So, NightDragon, meet Night Inc.
I love it. I love it. We're going to do it.
Looking forward to working with you a lot more, and thank you for coming on the show, and let's do lots of cool things together.
We're going to take over the world.
Love it.
All right,
thank you very much. Awesome.
I don't know what else to do. I want to get away from every little thing just to try to make it through. I've been thinking about my options, every detail in my head, but it doesn't really matter, nothing matters, so I cry instead. I've been running circles, I've been trying everything I can, but I ain't got nothing left. I've been running circles, trying to catch my breath. I've been trying everything I can. I ain't got nothing left.